On this channel, I often feature games from the 1990s or the early 2000s. Sometimes these games are of a particular importance and I want to put them front and centre in a video. And sometimes it's just a case that they are an interesting part of a larger story. You might call them retro, or you might just call them old, but either way I'm aware that their display can create a great deal of nostalgia or curiosity. Hi, I'm Calivan, and today we're going to take a quick look at the various ways that you can give these games a try for yourself, as it's often a bit easier than you might think. First, a disclaimer. I'm not a retro fanatic, but rather a PC enthusiast who got started in the early 90s. I'm not going to talk about consoles or MAME or arcade emulation or anything that was exclusive to Sinclair, Commodore, Atari or other early systems. There are heaps of quality YouTubers out there that cover those things, and I'm not that. So if you're interested in those topics, then I suggest you start with LGR and go from there. I got my start on MS-DOS running on an early Intel 386 system, so my particular knowledge begins there and doesn't really span outside anything that wasn't an evolution of that ecosystem. Since I started this channel, I've become aware of quite a few useful resources and tools that have helped me demonstrate or play some of the older games, so I'm going to talk you through the sites and services that I've used to bring the dead back to life. The first thing we should really mention is Abandonware. If you've not heard of the term before, it generally refers to software that no one has any commercial interest in anymore. This can be for many reasons. The first one is the simplest: it's simply been abandoned. Perhaps an entity does own the rights for it still, but the product is so old, or so bad or embarrassing, that they gave up hope of making any money from it years ago. This software is often ancient, does not run on modern systems, no longer has any support or updates, and isn't available for sale. The people who own it might come after you if you try to resell it or make a new game using the name or assets featured in it, but as long as no money changes hands, they don't care what happens. Even if this game is in a long-running series that's still active, it can actually be a benefit for the company to leave software in this state, as it allows their community to experience the old games without the owning entity spending any money on their modernisation, distribution and support. A great example of this is Sid Meier's Civilization. It's an active series, but the first game was released 33 years ago, so whoever owns that particular title is happy for it to be freely distributed and hasn't made any attempts to have it removed from the usual Abandonware channels. The second reason a particular piece of software might be classed as abandonware is if no one is sure who actually owns it anymore. A lot of early games were created by very small companies that might no longer be in existence. Many developers and publishers got bought, sold, merged, dissolved, or were chopped into tiny pieces and sold to several other entities. Less popular or older games that were part of a deal can easily fall through the cracks. Paper records can get lost or damaged, and if the product doesn't have any value, then no one bothers to track these things down and make a claim. The most commonly cited example of this is the No One Lives Forever series, which occupies some sort of ownership limbo that has evaded several attempts to unravel it. Different studios owned different parts of each game, and then these studios did a lot of merging and selling, and everything became a massive tangle. When someone did try to force the issue, each of them refused to dig through their decades-old physical archives to try and establish who it actually belongs to. If you tried to re-release that game or use the name, I'm sure they would rally round to block it and probably sue you. But as long as it's kept out of the commercial space, it's freely available to download and play. So that brings us nicely round to my first source of old games, myabandonware.com. This website has a catalogue of some 30,000 Abandonware games. As far as I can tell, they managed to continue to stay in operation by remaining above board, and will remove games at the request of the owning entity. Occasionally this happens, so you might find something on there that is later removed if it is re-released or remastered by the publisher. How you actually go about playing these games really depends on the age of the game in question. For older games that are generally only a handful of megabytes in size, you can actually play them in the browser using the built-in emulator. Mileage may vary, but it's great if you just want to check something out quickly. This here is Dune 2, what I consider to be the very first RTS created by Westwood back in 1992. It's in a fully playable state and works great as long as you put the window into full screen mode.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Games from this period all ran in MS-DOS, Microsoft's pre-Windows operating system. Although Windows 95 started to make graphical user interfaces more popular amongst the general public, many games would continue to operate happily in DOS all the way up to the late 90s. However, games were getting a bit bigger by this point, and as such you probably can't play them directly within a web browser. However, help is at hand, and there is a wonderful emulator called DOSBox that is really easy to install and operate. DOSBox does require a tiny bit of setup, but please don't be put off by this. You only need to learn a handful of very simple commands that were the kind of things I could handle as a 10-year-old, so I promise you it won't be a problem. Well, unless you're 9 maybe. Look here, I'll show you. First, I need to mount a virtual hard disk. I type mount, and then the drive letter, then the folder on my PC that contains the game data that I downloaded. And done. I can now switch to that drive by typing its letter followed by a colon. I can type dir to look at all of the folders in that drive. I see we've got one called moo, so I need to change to that directory by typing cd followed by its name. Now I type dir to look at the contents. Oh no, there are too many things to fit on one screen, what do we do? Well, it's no problem. I type dir again, add a /p at the end to pause on each screen, and I want to look for an exe file. There we go, orion.exe. I type the name of that file. It ends up, and amazing, I can play Master of Orion all over again. Now this isn't a tutorial, you should read the manual on the DOSBox homepage or watch a proper video guide, but I just wanted to show you that it's honestly really easy. But wait, I hear you say, what if you've downloaded a CD image? Surely that's really complicated. Not really. We just use the image mount command to turn that CD image into a virtual drive. Now we can go to that drive just as we did before by using the drive letter, looking for a file called something like install or setup and just typing that to run it. Just like before, it's a quick and easy process, and now we can experience the absolute wonder that is Sid Meier's Civilization. Okay, so that's the 90s covered, but what about later games? This is where things can get a little more tricky. I don't recommend downloading random games from unofficial sources and just trying them on your PC. In rare cases it might work, but way more often than not it will be incompatible with whatever version of Windows you are running, and you won't be able to even load the game. Worse still, the game might be infected with some sort of horrific malware that bricks your machine or encrypts all of your data and demands a ransom payment in Bitcoin. Now, if you are a particularly industrious sort, you might try running it on a virtual machine. If you know how these work, then it's not a bad option, but if you've never experimented with them before, then I would caution against it. Although you can get virtual machine software free from a trusted source like Oracle, you still need to acquire the appropriate version of Windows, ensure you have the correct BIOS options, and go through not an insignificant amount of configuration and setup. It takes a decent amount of learning and trial and error to get it working to a satisfactory state. It's great if you want a project, but not so good if you just want to play games. This is me playing Fate of the Dragon on my Windows XP virtual machine. You remember Fate of the Dragon, right? The Chinese developed RTS based on the 14th century epic Romance of the Three Kingdoms? No? I guess I don't blame you. It doesn't make many top 10 lists. If you are particularly devoted, you might want to get your hands on an old PC, preferably something from the Windows XP era. This way you can connect it up, download whatever you want, and if the whole thing gets riddled with viruses, then you can just wipe the thing and start over. However, this can be costly these days. Unfortunately, what was once just written off as old crap is now classed as retro, and a PC from 2003 could set you back more than a very basic new one today. However, does your dad have an old base unit from 20 years ago tucked away in the attic? Always worth asking. For anything in the post-DOS era, my go-to site is GOG.com. They used to be called Good Old Games, but at some point rebranded to just GOG. Although there is newer stuff on there now, they specialise in re-releasing old games and fixing them up in such a way that they run on modern systems. They are owned and operated by CD Projekt, the publishers behind Cyberpunk and The Witcher, so it's as legit and trustworthy as any online distributor can be. They also have their own digital delivery software, but they provide DRM-free standalone downloads of anything you buy, which is a nice touch. They are also pretty fair on their prices and have frequent sales, so you can often pick up games at a real bargain. I bought Empire Earth 2 a couple of weeks back for under $10. Supreme Commander is on there at the moment for $3.99 and Total Annihilation is just 99 cents. I've never had a problem running anything I've bought from there, and they normally bundle in the manual, soundtrack and other extras along with it. This is the concept art for TA, pretty cool stuff. They also included a load of logos and icons, very handy if you're a YouTuber. I love GOG, and I like how they do business, and I'm always happy when I can get an older game from them. I think they provide a great service, their prices are very reasonable and they have a decent support system too. I'm not sponsored by them, and I don't have an affiliate link or anything like that to give you. I just think they're a top bunch and deserve a little credit. So, what happens when there is an old game that you really want to play that isn't Abandonware and isn't available on GOG? Well, if you do have access to a VM or an old PC, then you might try eBay or an exchange store for a physical copy. I've got Rise of Nations on the way to me now. Sure, I could have bought it on Steam, but I didn't fancy paying $20 for a $3 game, so I found a copy on eBay. Failing that, you've got one last hope. Sometimes old games are remastered by the publisher or recreated by fans. Official releases are few and far between, as they generally only happen to the most popular of games, so you've probably heard about them already. Some notable examples are the 2020 remaster of Command & Conquer and Red Alert, as well as the 2015 remaster of Homeworld. Both of these are very well done, as is the remastered version of StarCraft. I'm also aware of Warcraft 3 Reforged and Age of Mythology Retold, but I've not tried them myself, so I'm unsure if they're any good. On the fan side, there are things like OpenXCOM, an open source remake of the original XCOM game. There's plenty other too, just have a Google and you'll find them. If none of my previous suggestions work for you, then I'm afraid you have to do what us old men have been doing for years. Relive the glory days in your head and tell everyone you meet that games were better when you were young. Hi there, I hope this guide to operating the oldies was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the like button, and if you've got any questions about this stuff, leave me a comment here or on the Discord and I'll do my best to help. And as usual, if you want more of this sort of thing, then subscribe to my channel and I hope to see you back soon.